I don't know why I still go to the little coffee place down the street. The coffee isn't special, the seats are uncomfortable, and the lights flicker just enough to make you notice. But it's steady. Familiar. Every morning at 8, I sit by the window, half reading, half watching the world pass. That's where I first noticed her. Noticed, not met. There's a difference. She came in a few times a week, always carrying a canvas tote full of books, as if she didn't trust the idea of being anywhere without a backup plan. She'd order tea, black, no sugar, and sit at the table near the door. Never in the middle, never by the window. Always near the door, as if she was giving herself permission to leave. I started looking for her without admitting I was looking. The scrape of her chair, the way she held her phone in both hands like she didn't quite trust it. The way she laughed, soft, like she was careful not to bother anyone. One morning, I ordered before she came in. The barista raised an eyebrow when I asked for tea. Black. No sugar. I carried it to her table, set it down without thinking too much, and said, "They might have mixed up your order." She looked up, eyes narrowing, amused but cautious. Then she smiled. "You're not as smooth as you think." I felt my face warm. "Didn't think I was smooth at all." She tapped the side of the cup, testing the heat. "Good. Because if you were, I'd probably never talk to you again." That was the first time she let me sit with her. Our conversations weren't really conversations. More like small exchanges that left too much space in between. She asked what I was reading. I lied and said I'd finished it already. She caught me glancing at the tote bag beside her chair, titles peeking out, essays, a novel I'd heard of but never read. She asked if I'd like any recommendations, and I nodded too quickly, like a kid. When she laughed, she covered her mouth with her hand. Not out of modesty, but like she'd forgotten she was allowed to laugh loudly. The next week, I passed a flower stand on my way to the cafe. I don't usually buy flowers. Didn't even know what half of them were called. But something about the way they looked, bright but not loud, like a held breath, made me stop. I picked a handful, more awkward than elegant, wrapped in paper that crinkled in my hands the whole walk over. She was already there, stirring her tea absent-mindedly. I placed the flowers on the table. Not directly in front of her, just close enough that she could take them or ignore them. She raised her eyebrows. "Are you trying to make me fall for you?" The words caught me off guard. My throat went dry, and I must have looked ridiculous, because she laughed again, shaking her head. "Relax," she said, brushing a stray petal off the table. "It was a joke." But her voice lingered on the word fall, softer than the rest. The flowers stayed between us, untouched, while we talked about everything except them. About the weather, about the book she was carrying that she swore I'd never finish, about how the cafe ceiling fan had been broken for months and nobody seemed to care. When I left that morning, I checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts. Just the usual quiet. But then, her name lit up the screen. I hadn't given her my number, not directly. I don't even remember when she'd taken mine. "You forgot your book." That was all the message said. I looked down at my bag. The book was still there. The next morning, I thought about not going. I sat at home, scrolling through nothing, staring at the same unread messages. It would have been easier to avoid her, to let the whole thing fade. But by 8, I was walking back toward the cafe, hands shoved too deep in my pockets. She was already there, tea steaming in front of her, tote bag at her feet. When she saw me, she tilted her head, like she'd been expecting me anyway. "You did forget something," she said, sliding a napkin across the table. My handwriting stared back at me. A line I'd scrawled the day before, notes from the book I pretended to have finished. I laughed under my breath. "So you read my notes?" She shrugged, not guilty at all. "You left them on the counter." "Fair game." Her eyes lingered on me longer than usual, though, as if weighing whether I'd catch on. I didn't say anything. We talked a little, her work, my classes. Nothing important. But halfway through, she said it without warning. "I used to come here with my husband. Before the divorce. The word hung in the air, heavier than the steam from her cup. She didn't flinch, didn't look at me, just traced a circle on the tabletop with her finger. I wanted to say something. Instead, I shifted in my chair and asked, "Do you still come for the same reason?" Her mouth twitched, like she almost smiled. "Habit, I guess. Some habits are hard to break." There it was, the quiet risk. The thing that made her different from anyone else I could have sat with. She wasn't just older. She was older in the way someone becomes when they've already lived a whole other life. And I was 23, with half-written papers and a sink full of dishes waiting at home. Still, I found myself noticing the way her hand rested near mine. The small space between us felt louder than the clinking cups around us. I imagined closing it, imagined what her skin would feel like, and immediately shook the thought away. "You're quiet," she said, watching me. I shrugged. "Just thinking." "Dangerous," she teased. But her voice softened after. "Don't think too hard. You'll ruin it." We sat in silence for a while. Not uncomfortable, but stretched, like a string pulled too tight. She reached for her tea, and the edge of her sleeve brushed against my wrist. Nothing deliberate. But she didn't pull away right away either. I didn't move. My breath caught, though I hoped she didn't notice. Then she leaned back, clearing her throat, and the moment was gone. She gathered her things, slipped the tote strap over her shoulder. "Walk me out?" she asked casually, like it didn't matter. I nodded. Outside, she paused by the flower stand on the corner, eyeing the bunches stacked in tin buckets. She picked up one stem, a pale carnation, and twirled it between her fingers before setting it back. When she looked at me, her smile was faint, unreadable. "Careful," she said. "You'll start making this a habit too." And then she touched my arm, just for a second. A touch that could have been nothing. But it followed me all the way home. The next week, she wasn't at the cafe. I sat by the window anyway, book open but unread, watching the door. 10 minutes passed. 15. I told myself I didn't care, that it was just a habit like she'd said. On the 4th day, she came in. No tote bag this time, just her phone in one hand, keys in the other. She looked tired, hair pinned up hastily, a faint crease between her brows. When she saw me, she hesitated, then walked over. "You're early," she said. "You're late." Her laugh was short, but it loosened something in my chest. We sat. Conversation moved slower than usual. She stirred her tea, forgot about it, stirred again. I tapped the table absently, waiting for her to say what was weighing on her. She didn't. Finally, she sighed. "My son's home from school this week. He keeps asking why I go out every morning." I didn't know what to tell him. The words settled heavy. A reminder of the gap, the risk. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Before I could answer, the door opened and a friend of mine, Eli, walked in. He spotted me instantly, grinning, waving as he headed over. I stiffened. "This seat taken?" Eli asked, sliding into the chair beside me before I could react. His eyes flicked between us, curious. "Didn't know you had company." She straightened, hands folding neatly on her lap, voice even. "We were just finishing up." Something in her tone made me look at her. Controlled. Careful. Like she was pulling a curtain closed. I mumbled an excuse, something about needing to leave soon anyway. Eli kept talking, asking about classes, making light jokes. I nodded at all the wrong times, distracted by the way she gathered her things quickly, quietly. When she stood, I almost stood too. But Eli was mid-sentence, and she gave me a small shake of her head, barely there, but enough. "See you," she said softly, not looking at me as she walked out. The silence she left behind was louder than Eli's chatter. That night, I couldn't stop replaying it. The way she avoided my eyes when she left. The deliberate calm in her voice. I typed out a message, "Did I do something?" then erased it. Tried again, "Want to meet tomorrow," then erased that too. The next morning, she was there before me. Sitting at the usual table, tote bag back at her side. When I slid into the chair across from her, she didn't smile right away. "You shouldn't let your friends see us," she said. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She shook her head slightly, almost apologetic. "It just complicates things." We sat in the heavy pause that followed. The fan overhead clicked with every rotation. My hand was on the table. Hers was close enough that if I moved an inch, we'd touch. She noticed. I know she did. Her eyes flicked down, lingered, then back to mine. For a second, either of us breathed. Her lips parted, like she might say something else. Or maybe not words at all. Then the barista called out an order too loudly, breaking the spell. She leaned back, exhaled, and the moment slipped. "Careful," she murmured, almost to herself. I nodded, though I didn't know what I was agreeing to. It was raining the afternoon I saw her again. Not a storm, just a steady, unrelenting drizzle that blurred the edges of everything. I found her sitting on the bench outside the cafe, umbrella tilted just enough to shield half her face. "You'll get sick," I said, standing there like an idiot, my own jacket already damp. She shifted, making room. "Sit. It's only water." So I sat. The rain pattered softly against the umbrella, against the sidewalk. We didn't speak for a while. The silence was heavier than words, but not uncomfortable. Almost safe. She finally broke it. "My ex called this morning. Said he's bringing someone new to meet our son." Her voice didn't crack, but the way she gripped the handle of her umbrella gave her away. Knuckles white. I didn't know what to say. The thought of her sitting across from someone else, pretending not to care, made something twist inside me. I hated that image more than I should have. "He'll be fine," I managed. She glanced at me, one brow arched. "Who? My son or me?" I tried to smile, but it faltered. "Both." She studied me, her gaze longer than usual. Like she was weighing something. Testing it. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered finally. "Not like this." Her words sank into me, cold and sharp. I swallowed hard. "Then why are you?" For a moment, she didn't answer. Just watched the rain slide down the street. Her lips parted, then closed again. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than the rain. "Because it feels easier when I am." My chest tightened. I wanted to tell her everything, that I thought about her when I shouldn't, that I noticed every small habit she tried to hide, that sitting beside her felt more real than anything else in my life. But the words stopped in my throat. Instead, I said, "I keep wondering if you laugh like that with anyone else." Her eyes widened slightly. Then softened. She looked down, fiddling with the umbrella strap. "You shouldn't wonder about things like that." "Too late," I said, barely above a whisper. The rain thickened, falling in sheets. Her shoulder brushed mine beneath the umbrella, and neither of us moved away. She exhaled, shaky, almost a laugh. "Do you even know what you're doing?" I wanted to answer. I wanted to tell her no, I didn't, but I didn't care. Instead, I just looked at her. Really looked. At the lines by her eyes, the faint dampness in her hair, the way her lips trembled like she was holding something back. The space between us felt impossibly thin. Her hand shifted on the bench, close enough that if I moved, just barely, we'd be touching. She turned, met my eyes. And then she asked, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, "What happens if we don't stop?" The next morning, I went early. Too early. I sat by the window, tapping my thumb against the rim of the cup, waiting for her to walk through the door. She didn't. 9 o'clock came. 10. People came and went, the usual rhythm of the cafe, but not her. I checked my phone, though I knew she hadn't messaged. I thought about sending something, "You okay?" but didn't. By the third day, I gave up waiting. On the fourth, I found her anyway. Not at the cafe. She was across the street, walking with her son, taller than I expected, carrying a backpack slung over one shoulder. She was laughing at something he said, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She looked different. present. Full. Like the version of her I didn't know, the one I wasn't meant to see. I froze. She didn't notice me. Or maybe she did and chose not to. That night, my phone buzzed. A message from her. Just 4 words: we should slow down. I read it again and again, searching for what she hadn't written. Slow down from what? From tea? From rain-soaked benches and awkward pauses? Or from whatever was coming next, the thing we hadn't admitted but both felt? I didn't reply. The next morning, I didn't go to the cafe. I stayed home, scrolling aimlessly, opening the fridge and closing it again, pacing the small length of my apartment like it might stretch if I walked enough laps. The silence was heavy, but it was mine. By evening I gave in. I typed out a message: "I'll stop if you want. But I don't want to." My thumb hovered over send. I stared until the words blurred. Then I deleted them. The following day, I went back to the cafe. Sat at our table, tried to pretend it was just another morning. The seat across from me stayed empty. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. The flowers by the counter looked brighter than usual. I thought about bringing them to her door. Knocking. Just asking, direct, simple. But I didn't move. I let the idea sit in my chest until it hurt, then set it down again. When I left, the rain had started again. Same steady drizzle as before, soaking the street, washing everything in silver. I walked home without an umbrella, every step slower than the last, like maybe if I dragged it out long enough, she'd catch up. She didn't. It was late when I finally saw her again. Not at the cafe. Not on the street. At her door. I hadn't planned it. My feet just carried me there, like they'd been waiting for permission. The hallway smelled faintly of rain and laundry detergent. I almost turned back twice. But then the door opened before I even knocked. She stood there in a sweater, hair loose, holding a half-folded blanket like I'd caught her mid-thought. Her eyes widened. "You shouldn't, I know," I said quickly. My voice came out rough. I needed to see you." We stood in the doorway, not moving. The air between us felt tighter than the space itself. Finally, she stepped back. "Come in. Before the neighbors start wondering." Her apartment was quiet. Lived in. A stack of mail on the counter, a mug left out by the sink. The kind of silence that didn't need filling. I sat at the edge of the couch while she folded the blanket carefully, smoothing the corners more than necessary. She avoided my eyes until she couldn't anymore. "You shouldn't make this a habit," she murmured. "You already said that," I answered. "And I didn't listen." That earned the faintest smile. But it faded quickly. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, like she needed to hold herself together. "My son," she began, then stopped. Her jaw tightened. "He'd never understand. And maybe he shouldn't have to." I swallowed. "I get it. I do." Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp, almost accusing. "Do you? Because you're young. You still have time to start over. I don't. I can't afford to make mistakes like this." I didn't know how to answer. My hands twisted in my lap, restless. Finally I said, "Then why do you keep meeting me? Why not just walk away?" Her silence told me everything before her words did. She pressed her lips together, exhaling through her nose. "Because you make it easier. And I hate that." The honesty landed heavy. Raw. Unpolished. I stood, closing the small distance between us. Not too close. Just enough that she had to look up at me. My chest was tight, but my voice came out steady. "I don't know what this is supposed to be. I just know I don't want it to stop." Her eyes glistened, though no tears fell. She studied me for a long time, searching, like she wanted me to give her an answer she could live with. Finally, she let her arms fall to her sides. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," I said. The silence stretched. The rain outside tapped against the window, steady and soft. Then, without ceremony, she reached out and placed her hand over mine. Just that. Warm, trembling slightly. We stood there like that, in the middle of her small kitchen, saying nothing more. Okay, she said at last. Barely audible. And it was enough. It didn't happen all at once. Nothing really does. The cafe became less about waiting, more about meeting. Sometimes we arrived together, sometimes apart, but the table near the door was always ours. She still ordered tea, black, no sugar. I still pretended to like the bitter coffee, though she'd caught me slipping sugar into it once and never let me forget it. The habit stayed. 8:47, more or less. Some mornings we didn't talk much at all, just sat with our cups, reading, the silence between us comfortable now. Her son knew. Or maybe he guessed. He never asked outright, but the way he looked at me, curious, measuring, said enough. Over time, the curiosity softened. I'd help carry groceries in, he'd ask about classes, she'd watch us from the kitchen with that half-smile she tried to hide. It wasn't easy. There were still moments she pulled back, reminding me of the years between us, the life she'd already lived. And there were times I doubted, wondering if I was enough, if she'd wake one day and realize I was just a phase. But the pauses grew shorter. The fears quieter. One rainy afternoon, months later, we ended up back at the bench outside the cafe. Same drizzle, same umbrella tilted awkwardly between us. She nudged my shoulder and said, "Remember the first time we sat here?" "Yeah," I said. "You told me it was only water." She smiled. Still true. We sat there, the sound of rain filling the spaces we didn't need to. Her hand found mine again, no hesitation this time. Just warm, steady. Like it belonged there. I realized then it wasn't about the flowers, or the pauses, or even the risk we thought we were taking. It was about the simple fact of showing up. Every morning, every silence, every time she thought she should leave but didn't. Life hadn't transformed. The cafe still flickered. The fan still clicked overhead. My sink was still full of dishes more often than not. Her mail still piled up on the counter. But when I looked at her, across a table cluttered with half-empty cups and folded napkins, I felt something close to peace. Not perfect. Just enough. That morning, as we stood to leave, she leaned close, barely above a whisper. "Careful." The same word she'd said months ago, when everything was uncertain. Only this time, her voice held no warning. Just a trace of humor. Of knowing. I squeezed her hand gently. "Habit," I said. And she laughed, the kind of laugh she never covered anymore.